Alright, so this is set 3. This is against Sultai Ultimatum, and we are currently 1-1. We won against Mono Green in set 1, and we lost against Jeskai Cycling in set 2. So this hand looks great. The Fire Prophecy is dead in this matchup, but the Iteration and a potential combo piece with 3 lands is generally just to keep regardless. So this matchup generally is pretty good for us. It had the worst win rate for Mutate in the Pro Tour, and I think that's largely because when players know how to combat this deck as the Ultimatum, the deck does a little better. Like, the best cards in their deck against us is Elder Gargaroth and Pulukronos, like, by a mile. And I don't run into them very much when I play the matchup, which is kind of weird. I get the impression that maybe some Ultimatum players side those out when they really shouldn't be. I mean, there's other times where those cards just aren't good enough. So I'm going to play these games go really long, so I try to prioritize getting as many lands as possible, because missing a land drop, even around 5 or 6 lands, can really mess you up. Since they are very much the aggressor in this game, because our end game with the Mutate loops is much stronger than their Ultimatum end game. Generally, a resolved Ultimatum will kill you a turn or two after it resolves, while us mutating our stuff, we can do it faster than they can cast their Ultimatum reliably, and it almost always kills the turn that it starts going off. The smaller mutates where you're just trying to get value, that's not really what I'm talking about. It's those combo turns where you have most of your pieces and you're trying to find the last one, basically. Yeah, so he moves his Yorion to hand here, which lets us resolve our Seize the Spoils. As I've said in the previous videos, finding a place just to get the Seize into your graveyard and to use it can be kind of problematic. Like, it's going to come out in this matchup for sure, because getting a Seize countered, you're typically losing 2 cards instead of 1, because you still have to pay that discard cost, and then your Seize is getting countered. I ran into a similar problem in the mirror where I was trying to resolve my Seize and the opponent kept unsubstantiating it, because generally unsubstantiating the mirror is not great, but against Seize, they're going plus. We're basically trading cards instead of going -1, trying to prevent something from happening. Anyway, our opponent just cultivates here. We generally don't want to counter cultivate in this matchup. You want to save all your interaction for things that are either going to kill you or are going to stop you from winning the game. Because even when your opponent has a ton of lands, they're only casting 1 to 2 spells a turn. I learned that the hard way. In testing, I tried countering cultivates to see where that would get me, and eventually the Ultimatum player could just resolve their big things and I had nothing to really do about it. Unfortunately, we don't really find a land here, so we're probably going to have to let something go. I guess the only real difficult choice here is whether I want to put the Dispute or the Negate in my hand. The only information we really have is he does have Yorion in hand, but Dispute is much easier to play around than Negate is. I do decide to put the Dispute in hand with the information that I have, and we're going to put the Prismatic Command in exile. I believe we're just going to fire it off here, which is kind of risky. However, because I am creating a treasure token here, we can Dispute an Ultimatum. This also gives us an opportunity to get rid of some stuff that we really don't need. We're not really close to our end game yet. We could draw a Goldspan and just try and, instead of trying to combo him off, just try and outvalue him. So he goes for Valky here. We're not really scared of this because we have a Spike Field Hazard. He does get to see our hand, though, so the most relevant part about this interaction is now he knows we have the Dispute and he knows he can play around it. As I mentioned, Dispute is a very play-aroundable card. So opponent sees the Spike Field Hazard in hand and decides to play around it. We don't really want to waste our treasure token just to get our Lord Drakus back. We can do that without unsubstantiate at really any point. And if we're mid-combo, we're perfectly happy using an unsubstantiate on the Drakus because it'll just continue the combo for us. Mazeman Tomb's a great draw here. Generally, whenever you're playing this matchup, those Seize the Spoils do come out for Mazeman Tombs. So Mazeman Tome is pretty optimal. The one Mazeman Tome I ran main deck throughout this tournament, I felt overperformed. It won me a lot of games that a third Seize would just have not been nearly as good. To the point where it is an arguable consideration to go down to 1 Seize. So he plays Yorion here. Notably, he has 3 mana open, so like I said, a Mystical Dispute is very easy to play around. So I can't really counter it. This moves his enchantments around, so he has as much mana as possible on my turn, in case he's holding up interaction of some sort. I mean, we're just happy to draw cards and wait for him to do something since we have a Mazemind Tome out. The only real notable thing about this is he is starting to amass a clock, so I may have to act before I want to at some point. Not the best iteration in the world. The Octopus is decent because it gives me some options if I need to kind of refuel and find more spells to keep tempo. I can do that at instant speed, but the 2 lands are not great. He also has a 3-turn clock on us, so we do have this turn and next turn to basically try and address the current situation. So here I'm going to try and force his hand with interaction. Like I said, I do feel pressure to do something now, and there's also so we start forcing our opponent's hand using their removal here, which is what we're after. I'm gonna see what's on top of my deck before I make any decisions. It's another Unsubstantiate. Not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for pressure or board presence now. Unsub can hold a turn, but yeah, so we're gonna try and protect our Sea Dasher here. At least try and get him to use another piece of removal at worst. So yeah, he uses 2 pieces. We're okay with that. It means if we draw into our combo, he can't really interact with us, or he has a smaller chance. Like there, we have our win condition is card advantage, so we're perfectly happy trading cards in our hand for cards in his, because like we now have 6 cards in hand and he has 2. The downside is he's definitely winning on board. So here we're gonna slow the clock down, give ourselves an extra turn, get our Lord Dracus back. And we also have the Mazemind Tome as well, so which will gain us 4 life if we absolutely need it. So at this point, we have 2 or 3 turns to kind of debate what we want to do here instead of previously the 2. So yeah, we traded cards in hand, got his hand size down, and then we gave ourselves more turns to find what we need to find. And then worst case scenario, we can also just grab a bunch of cards from graveyard and keep going. We'd rather just draw with Mazemind Tome and try and find something that way, but the opponent's debating running out that 2/2 in order to speed up his clock, which makes sense. It will reduce a 3-turn clock to a 2-turn clock if he makes a 2/2 here, because I am going to go to 12 off the Mazemind Tome. He does eventually decide to make his wolf. We're going to try and find our win condition. That is exactly what we're looking for. It's pretty safe to try and resolve a gold span here. He only has 2 cards, and he has no black. So we might run into a Disdainful Stroke, which we do, but we do have answers for that. It's more of a question of what answer do I want to use. I'm going to use the negate here. He did have a black open there. I missed that. And he does have 3 mana open. Kind of just blended in with the background. So here I'm just looking at what I want to find. I can't iteration right away. I'm definitely going to have to take a turn of just trying to figure out what to do here. So we are going to take back Spikefield Hazard. Oh, we're just gonna go for it. Okay. Interesting. Watching this in retrospect, I think I would have done something different. We find another Lord Drakus and another Goldspan. So if we manage to find the Vadrock, which is really all we're really missing at this point, he's definitely dead before the timer. The Goldspan Dragon, the second Goldspan Dragon in hand, can let us bypass the step of cracking all of our treasure tokens. So we're gonna go Iteration, bring back Spikefield Hazard for mana, and bring back just some protection in case we can't follow up next turn. We get at least Iteration one more time if you want to commit the Drakus. Yeah, I'm gonna Spikefield Hazard first, get that mana. Get a bunch of value and some protection. We're gonna run the Seas right now. The blue mana is we're gonna lose at the end of our turn, so you may as well use it. And the Spikefield Hazard, we're not gonna be able to hit ourselves for more damage. Find a land, good enough. And yeah, so get rid of the Spikefield. We're not concerned about mana now. So we have basically, the only thing that can kill us from this position is Vorinclex. And I'm pretty confident that we can fend it off. We only have the 1 on sub, but that should be enough. He doesn't have Vorinclex, so we go down to 2. We'll go up to 12 in case he has any tricks. Not super interested in seeing a land. We're still looking for that Bedrock. He tries to Extinction Event our Goldspan. Not super fond of letting all the Lord Drakuses go, so we're definitely going to interact with this. We just don't know how I'm going to go about it. I think interesting. I just go for the negate here. I think what I would do from this, I don't know. Yeah, no, I agree with what I did there. Because like the other way I could have gone was float red and 2 blue, and then unsub my own dragon holding up Dispute, but there's no way Dispute's going to catch anything. And he knows about it too, so. And there is the Vadrock, and an unsub the boot. We definitely have lethal here. I'm gonna swing in first, get that treasure token. He's totally tapped out. So, just gonna mutate right away. I could have put the Prismatic Command in Graveyard there, but I could only cast 1 spell for free here. So, there isn't really a reason for me to do that yet. I need to find another Vadrock, which will probably happen. Gonna set up the bounce since I don't really have any more extensions for the combo. Notably, I have 4 mana here, and the unsubstantiate targeting the Goldspan will be net 0. I do have an opportunity to create another mana here, and really I'm not gonna do much else with this Prismari command because I do have lethal. So I'm gonna go right ahead and net that 1 mana. Remember, if you're gonna do this with your Goldspan being at 2, you have to full control, or else your Prismari command will kill your Goldspan. You won't have an opportunity to put the unsub on top of the stack. I will put a stamp around this point, skipping to the beginning of game 2 in this set, because from this point I'm just going to be comboing off. So if you're interested in watching that, go for it, but if you've studied the deck and you already know what to do from this point, go right ahead and move on to game 2. So for the people that are still interested in navigating the combo, notice I keep returning the Spike Field to hand, always netting that 1 mana. This isn't infinite. I'm just trying to be as efficient as possible because the arena timer is still a concern. We're way ahead of it at this point. We're not going to time out. And with that, we move on to game 2. So, sideboarding for Sultai is pretty straightforward. You want to have the Mazemind Tomes because it is a very grindy matchup. Take away the Seizes because them getting countered basically means you go -2. Fire Prophecy, as we mentioned before, is a very dead card, so you want to get rid of that. Disdainful Stroke basically is in our sideboard for the Mirror and for Sultai only, because all the cards in Sultai that we're worried about are 4 mana plus, which being Polukranos, Gargaroth, Yorion, Binding the Old Gods, and Ultimatum itself. And then all the things that come off of Ultimatum, like, I don't know, QR Best to See God, and Professor Onyx sometimes Valky, sometimes Epiphany. Anyway, point being, it hits a lot of stuff in the matchup. It hits everything that we're concerned about. Essence Scatter definitely stays in, because the scariest cards in the matchup for us are creatures. Here I'm just debating whether I should keep the Sea Dasher Octopus or not. Since I do have to trim a card here. I think trimming the Octopus is okay. But it's also not bad in the matchup. Like, last time we used the Octopus and it forced our opponent to go down 2 cards trying to contain it, which was really good for us, just trying to win the card advantage war there. So, it did do a lot of work game 1. Actually, I do get... like, when I find every time I use Octopus, I think it's just because it's an unusual option. It does a lot. Like, what is it? In what I can say is, at least in a game later in the tournament, it carries me so hard. I don't really want to spoil it though, because in my opinion, that's like the best part of the entire run. Well, opponent's on the play. This hand looks great. It is a little land heavy, since Spikefield Hazard in this matchup is generally a land, but we're okay with that because the matchup is very slow. We have Iteration, we have Dispute, Unsub Dragon. Yeah, this hand looks great. Opponent just Wolf-Will Havening. We generally don't really care about them ramping up. Like I said before, I've tried countering their ramp spells just to see what would happen, and it's not where you want to be at all. The only time where it's problematic is if they get out like a really early Polukranos and you can't deal with it. Because Polukranos can fight Goldspan without Goldspan creating a treasure token, which can be very difficult to interact with. Their shield's down, so we're happy to resolve an Expressive Iteration here. Iteration's okay. We have another Unsub to interact with their stuff, but we don't find any Mutate pieces. The other thing we have to decide here is where we want to play our land from, because ultimately we are over 7 cards. You could argue there that for that reason, maybe playing the Iteration was incorrect. Because a big part of why Iteration's so good and so sought after right now is because of that card advantage. So, yeah, there's definitely an argument for whether I should or shouldn't have played Iteration here. I think it's fine, but it also might not be optimal, so something to keep in mind. We'll see how that affects the game later down the line. This is valuable for me too, right? Because I'm also looking back on my own games and seeing where I made mistakes. So I'm learning along with you guys in some way. Cultivate, ramping up. We're okay with it. We can't interact with it anyway, so it's kind of whatever. We really just didn't want to see Pelucranos there. That would have put us in a really awkward spot. Yeah, he's tapping out. Not really afraid of us doing anything. If we had open mana there, you definitely shouldn't tap out, because I could Prismari Command, make a mana punish into Goldspan on turn 4, which would be basically the end of the game, probably. With all of this protection I have, it'd be very hard, and the Lord Drakus that I just drew, it'd be pretty difficult for Ultimate to get there. He does Duress us here. Duress is very, very good right now, because I can't do anything about it, and it gives him a ton of information. After deliberating for a long time, our opponent decides to take Unsubstantiate. So what does this tell us? We already know from the way that they played game 1, our opponent's not afraid of playing around in Dispute. It could suggest that our opponent has a lot of heavy, like big haymakery stuff in their hand. It could also suggest that our opponent is very interested in trying to remove our Goldspan Dragon, which makes sense. So they're just trying to get rid of as much protection as possible. Not super interested in running Goldspan out here. There's a very good chance they can just Disdainful Stroke it. I don't know if this list is running Jwari Disruption, but if it is, that's definitely a major contributor here. I really don't want to run into that card. That feels really bad to run into. Vegas are not Yorion. They really want to try and get a clock on us, and noticeably, they are playing around the dispute. We cannot dispute their thing. We're going to go for the unsub, I think. Yep. Yeah, it makes sense here. This gives us a pretty clean window to play our Goldspan. However, our opponent is aware of the dispute in our hand, so I would assume that they're prepared for it. But we have 2, so we're okay just throwing 1 to the wind. So there's our Goldspan. I imagine if they have a dispute, they might play it. Or sorry, not a dispute. I think I could play a dispute here, actually. That'd be fine. Make me use mine and then just remove the creature. Presumably. We are going to go for the Drakus Mutate here. Try and get some protection for our Goldspan. And unsub will basically just buy back the Drakus anyway. So it's not a very lengthy investment. Okay, I eventually decided to take the iteration. Looking back on this, I really don't like this play, because by unsubbing my own Goldspan, I can just Lord Drakus and remutate. I understand choosing to play the iteration from the perspective of because I have a second Goldspan in hand, but yeah. I mean, the other end of the spectrum here is if they had a counter for iteration, which I think is probably what I assumed at the time, my hand is dead. Yeah, like if I try to unsub my dragon and they counter it with a 2-mana counter, and then I try to dispute, like this dispute won't work once again. So from that perspective, I can understand why I would wait. I decided not to go for Goldspan here. Makes sense to me. He's basically representing an easy way to remove Goldspan with the Orion and Binding, and I know for a fact that I can't counter that either. Our opponent's just gonna go straight for the Orion. We cannot interact with that. Takes out the treasure token, which isn't, I mean, not awful, but also not great. They can draw some cards. Yeah, that iteration versus unsub. I think in retrospect it would have gone with unsub, but I understand. Like, if you assume that your opponent has a plan to take care of your Goldspan, then going with Iteration does make sense. Especially since I wasn't really valuing the gold span super high. I probably should have valued it higher because I could just re-Dracus and bring something back. Like, I could deal with whatever plan they had and then either keep dealing with it over and over until I find some more cards, or make that switch. So I decided not to play gold span here, which is interesting. Not really sure why I did that. I mean, I'm not really pressured to do anything, which is a factor. Yeah, I don't feel pressured in any way, but I wonder why I chose not to play it. The Agonizing Remorse here is really, really rough. So we're going to negate that. Goes through. But notably now, we don't really have any protection for gold span. So we're going to go for it now. I don't really know why. He disdainful strokes it. We can't do anything about that. Yeah, so we waited a turn too long, for sure. If we had Dragon last turn and he had disdainful strokes, I'm like, okay, I negate that and try and get Badrock on it and get something started. Yeah, I don't think I should have, I don't know what my mindset was waiting there. He had a lot of open mana, so like, if he had 2 pieces of negation, yeah, I'm screwed. But, so, this is really important because what was a 4-turn clock and I wasn't super worried about it, now becomes yeah, I'm afraid of the Tibble. If the Tibble ults, like, there's no way I'm winning this game. The big turning point to these games is card advantage. A, I can't recur anything from my graveyard because he's ulting it. B, he has all those cards to use. So a Tibble ult against this deck will almost always crush you unless you have a very specific plan on how to get around it. Like, sometimes if there's a weird moment where you have to let an ultimatum go and you have to let them ult. So yeah, I can't counter this with Dispute. Badrock's just not doing anything. So I waited. That one turn gold span wait was really bad. I should not have done that. I can understand at the time thinking I might just run into something, but him drawing that Remorse was a really heavy punish for me. Secondly, I'm still not sure. Like, if you assume that he had a plan for my gold span, then getting back Iteration made sense, but looking back at this, because I would unsub the Dracus along with the gold span, I think unsub may have been the better play, but I'm not entirely sure. So, really, the big mistake that game was just the waiting a turn and not doing anything. It might not have mattered, though. If my Iteration did hit nothing, the game would have ended the same way. So, this hand is pretty good, but it's a little top-heavy. I have a lot of combo pieces. Having the extra combo pieces gives me an opportunity to run into some removal. But with this hand, I'm really pressured to find lands. Opponent duresses me right off the bat, which is really good for them. Pretty easy negate here for them, just easy take on the negate. The unsub is more situational. The negate covers a lot more. What it does tell us is we probably don't have to worry about Pelucranos or Gargaroth. Maze Phantom is a really good draw for us. I think the only draw that might have been better would be maybe, I don't know, that might have been the best draw on the deck. The only other draw that's arguably better is a land. But this will help us find lands, so arguably it's even better. So they're going to Nightmare. Notably, this controls our graveyard and gives them more information. We're not super happy seeing this. It's a little annoying, but we also can't do anything about it. So yeah, happy to see this land off this Scry from Maze-Mind Tome. We're kind of just forced to wait it out here. The only thing you can take is unsub, and we can't really bounce anything with it. So He gets to take our own sub for free. We do have the Lord Drakis, so we can kind of get it back if we need it. But this does give him a window to do something very impactful. This is a really good opportunity for our opponent to try and establish a lead. After a period of thought, our opponent decides not to do anything. So they're pretty worried about us running out gold spend next turn. We hit Iteration off of the Maze Mind Tome, which is probably the next, like, better than anything except for a land. We really need to hit that land 5. A lot of thought going into trying to scry for a land here. I decided eventually that it's probably more valuable if I just hold the Maze Mind Tome for card draw. Notably, I don't do anything here, which is interesting. I mean, part of me at this point is maybe a little conditioned, but I'm very used to having my iterations countered. So I might be valuing the iteration a little too highly here. Looking at this right now, I think running it out would have been fine because I'm holding up the Maze Mind Tome to draw a card. However, the reason why I didn't run it out at the time was because I valued the iteration being in my graveyard so much that I didn't want it to get exiled by the third mode on Nightmare, which is why I decided to hold on to it. I really did not want that iteration getting exiled and stopping my combo later in the game. Find a third gold span. That's awkward. So really debating trying to find this land with a scry here. I have other things to do this turn, so I'm not super worried about getting the value off of Maze Mind Tome. And we find a dispute. Think about it a little bit because it is valuable. We don't really have interaction for his big scary stuff. Eventually decide we really just need a land, which I think is correct. Draw a second dispute. That's kind of funny. Yeah, so at this point we're iterationing for sure. We need to find our 5th land. We also can iteration behind a dispute. Iteration goes off and we don't find a land. Wow. So, bit of a think about this before making a decision, because at this point I'm just trying to figure out how I map this without dying, because I haven't found a land yet. Put our combo piece in hand, get rid of that iteration, and just try and land a Maze Mind Tome. I don't think there's a way my opponent ultimatums on their turn. Maze Mind Tome goes down to dispute. Makes sense. We're not finding a land, so they're probably pretty happy using cards to stop us. Duress gives them some more information. Dispute is very play aroundable. They've demonstrated that they're very happy to play around it, and Prismari Command kind of solves my problem right now. So yeah, so eventually he does take the Prismari Command. He does think of it though, which means he's probably interested in trying to resolve something that Dispute will stop. Fortunately for me, so he just goes straight into Cultivator, doesn't want to run into Dispute later on. Makes a lot of sense. And at this point we're not drawing lands either, so it's a bit of a gamble on his part. If I draw a land and he doesn't have interaction for gold spend, this can go very wrong for him. We do draw a land, but not the land we really needed. This puts us in a pretty awful position, but at the same notion, we can stop him from resolving something that would bury us into the ground. Like Yorion is not great. Actually, we can stop the Yorion because it's not in his hand. He won't have enough mana to bypass the dispute. So yeah, fortunately, while the draw wasn't great, he doesn't really have the opportunity to get ahead here because the dispute stops him. So maybe our opponent should have taken dispute there. I'm not really sure, but it is a possibility. So at this point, we just need to play cards. Our hand is really backed up, and even if he's killing these gold spans, it doesn't really matter all that much. We really just need to play cards. Because if he has the opportunity to play something very impactful, and we're just holding up all of our cards waiting to combo, it might not matter. And, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious. We only need one gold span to win the game, so the other two are kind of redundant. We're just happy to play them out and try and fix our mana situation. Notably, I'm not playing the Lord Drakus here because I needed to... Well, I'll probably need to win the game, and the cards in my graveyard aren't very valuable. I want to impact the board right now. I don't really care about finding more cards. If there's protection, I'd probably consider it more. Opponent trying to find some way to combat the onslaught of threats in my hand. And it's a really good sign that he's scrying 2 to the bottom. Finds a binding, gets rid of Goldspan. We have 3. We don't really care all that much. He does represent removal with the next one, though. But very notably, now I'm in a position where I have enough mana to do things. And if I manage to draw an untapped land here, I'm going to be in a very good spot. Because I can hold up that dispute. And there it is. You finally start drawing the lands we've needed for the past few turns. Goldspan resolves. There's no pauses, which tells me it's go time. It tells me that he has nothing. A little bit of debating here. Looking at this right now, yeah, I think Prismatic Command is the right choice. We're not super worried about mana because we're pretty sure he has nothing with how the pauses of the arena pauses have kind of demonstrated. So bluffing's a little harder on online. I think if I were playing this in paper, I probably would have targeted myself. I wouldn't have hit him for 2. Find another mutate piece. At this point, yeah, he is not in a good place. Notably, we don't have the infinite, but we have a ton of mana, yeah, and a ton of ways to find it. So another misplay. I don't think it really matters at this point, but you cannot cast, or you cannot bring back Mazevine Tome with Lord Drakus. So what I should have done here was cast the Mazevine Tome instead, or order the Lord Drakus trigger to resolve last, so I don't bring anything back. I used the Prismatic Command to instead cycle cards back to my, or cycle the iterations back to my graveyard. And now I have 2 iterations in graveyard, so I don't have to worry about making the same mistake. This is a really good iteration for us in combo. We just want to find mutate pieces and mana, which is exactly what we found. And you can see lethal in hand here. Spike Field Hazard hits him down to 2, and then the Lord Drakus will mutate onto the Goldspan, and I will be able to recast Prismatic Command for 2 damage. So, as I mentioned, game 2 was a bit of a blunder. The mistake that was made game 3, besides maybe I should have casted the iteration a bit earlier, but otherwise it wasn't the mistakes didn't really impact the game state at all. But yeah, that is set 3. We are now 2-1 going into set 4. Notably, set 4 was not recorded because I had an issue with my internet. I did win that 2-1 as well, entering it with a game loss. I was against Cycling, and as I mentioned in the previous video, unlike our game 2 opponent, our Cycling opponent in game 4 did play out their creatures on curve, and it didn't work out for them. We have a ton of removal. Yeah, it didn't work out. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll try to crank the rest of these sets out as quickly as possible so I can move on to some D&D content. And yeah, see you in the next one.